Namaste and welcome again to another edition of Live, Love, Engage. I am Gloria Grace Rand, and I am, as always, delighted to have a guest with us on the show. And I met this woman recently at a publicity event, and I knew what she had to talk about was going to be perfect for our audience. So first off, before I tell you more about who she is and why I thought she'd be so great, I want to welcome Jodi Wellman to Live, Love, Engage.
Oh, thank you so much. I am really excited to be here with you.
Well, yeah, I think your topic is going to be, well, it's appropriate anytime, but I think especially nowadays, it seems like even more so. So let me tell you who Jodi is. She is a speaker, an executive coach, and assistant instructor in the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania, and also the founder of 4,000 Mondays. And I think I can say this, even though she didn't use the word in her bio, but I believe probably that your mission is just to have people live squander-free lives without deathbed regrets.
Mm.
So I wanted to, normally I start off our interviews by asking our guests to kind of share their journey and where they got here. And I have a feeling since I know more about you than our audience does so far, if I asked you instead to talk about why is your company called 4,000 Mondays, because I know that will probably answer that question of how you got to where you are today.
Right, we're going to connect the dots pretty quickly. You're right.
Good.
When I give you the behind the scenes scoop. So 4,000 Mondays is roughly all we get in life to live. And I don't know about you, but when we calculate that and see that, and then what I like to do without it being overly morbid, I really like for it to be more motivational than morbid, but to say, excuse me, if we do calculate how many of those Mondays we have left, could that be the thing that actually wakes us up to not just the finite nature of life, which, yeah, that's unfortunate, but that allows us to say, wait a minute, I have this remaining time. It's precious. How can I live it with the greatest intention? And so that, yeah, 4,000 Mondays is the reminder of how temporary we are. And then the impetus to say, let's figure out ways to make the most of it.
So I appreciate that, and it is really a startling statistic when you think about it. What led you to calculate that? So
Right. Why that morbid math? Well, I have always been interested in the absurdity of, the fact that we are unfortunately not going to live forever. And so when I studied it at the program at University of Pennsylvania, so I studied it within the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology. And I'm going to be super honest with you before you even say it out loud. Like, wait a minute, how is that related? Positive psychology is about, wait a minute, isn't that the study of what makes life worth living? And then here you are talking about mortality. And that's where I just want to say, oh, but wait, give me one sec, because, so I did find in researching this topic, this countdown idea that, I mean, you can't imagine how giddy I got when I thought, wait a sec, there's actually empirical evidence that backs up that this is actually useful for us. And so that gave me, admittedly, a little bit more traction around, oh, this is a real thing. I can work with this. There's psychological science. There's a background to this. And so then I've just taken it and I've sort of overcharged, super drive, on making this, platform to talk to people about.
well, I love that, and I also love how giddy you are at research. I think that was very
Yeah. Yeah. A bit of a dork.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I like that. I get that way about certain things. I'm fascinated by the study of the brain, for instance. So I love reading up on that. So I have the geeky side to me as well. So tell me a little bit, expand on this a little bit then about, the research and the research that,
Yeah.
then correlates to this, and why is it important for us to know about that?
Okay, great. Thanks for asking. I love it. And so the first chunk that I think makes this relevant is a concept called temporal scarcity.
Mm.
And what that is when you take something, any kind of resource, any kind of asset, and you say, and you position it in such a way that it is elusive or rare or, for a limited time only. Like if you're purchasing something,
Right.
picture any infomercial, I suppose, there's a limited quantity. When we see something, anything in a limited light, it increases our perceived value of that thing. And so then I was like, well, wait a minute, this is more than a thing. And so there is research around the temporal nature, which temporal just refers to like span of time, that they've really shown that people who are in college, who are primed to recognize that, hey, your college years are going to be over soon, they all of a sudden get out there and start participating in activities in ways that those who are not primed to really stop and say, wait, you've got 4 months and 12 days left. They just take it for granted. And all of a sudden, oh no, college is over. And that's just one study of many, but we do this in life, right? Like when you're on a vacation, when it's Thursday night, you all of a sudden go, wait a minute, I'm going home on Saturday. I've really got to savor Friday and Saturday morning. And so this is the whole concept, is seeing our lives through this lens, again, without dwelling on the dire part. Well, actually, we can, there's more evidence there too, but the effect of that countdown triggers for many of us a desire to do this thing right, quote unquote, which we can discuss too, because there is no right or wrong, right? What's right for you is different than what's right for your neighbor and so on. But temporal scarcity is really the backbone of why this concept works.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And I was just flashing back to my son, actually, when he was in school, and how he would like wait until the last minute to get things done. Because all of a sudden it was like, oh crap, I got to get this done. And I know sometimes we're like that in other aspects of our lives too. And having a deadline is a good motivator. And for instance, I used to work in television, so I worked for a news program, so we had to get on the air every day at 6:30 at night. So you had to get things done in time. And the good thing about it is then nothing carried over to the next day, or rarely, unless we were doing a series or something. And so then you get to start fresh the next. And I wonder is how we can treat that, maybe, treating each day in a way like that as well. Because, because we never do know when, when our number's coming up, even though we say, you might have 1,000 Mondays left, or, or whatever, but they're not, we can't really take that for granted, can we? What's your
so
thought
right
about that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we're on the same wavelength here. This is exciting because the more granular you get, sometimes the more aware you become. And then I think for most of us, it does put us into more of an action sort of orientation, right? So there are thought experiments. When you're commenting on each day being precious, the Nietzsche had a thought experiment that I find fascinating. It was called the eternal return, where he had said that, I won't do the full backstory. I won't bore us all to death, but that imagine for some reason you found out that you need to live your entire life as you have lived it, however many years that is, however many Mondays, you need to live that life over again and again and again and again, all into eternity. And that every high, every low, every mundane moment of going and getting an oil change, all the silly life, that's your life, and you're going to live it a billion, trillion, a gazillion eternity time. That will either elate you, or he said it would crush you to think that, what have I been doing? And so sometimes that's the kind of trigger. The reason I mentioned that one actually, Gloria, is because it made me think about another more severe version of that thought experiment, which is imagine if you had to live yesterday again and again and again and again. And what that usually does is it makes us stop and think, yeah, but that was just, I didn't know that was the day that I was going to get to relive. I would have done all the neat things. I would have gone out to brunch. I would have called friends. I would have had but that's just life, right? So it does make you then grab and say, how do I make today, not that we're going to find out from some sort of a Nietzsche type person that we're going to have to repeat it again and again, but it is that moment of, well, what am I doing with today? Am I living today in a way that is both full of vitality and meaning. Because there, I think I look at it like two dimensions, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that that's an interesting perspective that you brought up, is like having it be literally day by day.
Yeah, and it was just as you were saying that, I was like flashing back onto, the lovely movie Groundhog Day, with Bill Murray, and that he had to then relive that day, but at least he had the option of being able to change his behavior, and so that was able to finally get him out of that. So since we don't have that, our life is not a movie like that, but it is a movie that we get to create on a day-to-day basis. What do you, you are a coach, so I assume that you are, helping your clients, about this as well. And what are some of the things maybe that you have encouraged them to focus on with regards to this?
Yeah, I find it helpful to think in terms of frameworks. And so this helps me, but I think it also helps other people. And so what I like to look at is life through a couple of different dimensions. And I think that it affords us the ability to stop and say, wait, I need help with that dimension, or I want a little more of that now. And so the way I think of it is in a world where we're definitely interested in living longer. Like, hey, let's live longer if we're able-bodied and able-brained and all sorts of great. Even if we're not fully able-bodied and brained. But we also ideally want to live wider and deeper. And so the living wider part of this framework is adding more vitality into our lives. And that can be seen as all the fun experiences. That's typical pleasure. That's the part about going out for brunch. That's the part about, having fun excursions and literally fun and happiness. Okay. So that's just, it could be cheap and cheerful, or it could be super expensive. It doesn't matter. So that's the widening part. And then there is the deepening part, which is more on the meaning spectrum, which is the feeling that we have some sense of purpose, the feeling that we are connected to other people, that we are feeling like we're giving. And this is like the more rich types of components of living. And research shows that we do need a medley of both. There's no judgment either way. And so for many people, the way that I would work with groups or teams or individuals is to do a bit of an assessment initially. And I talk about it like diagnosing the dead zones. I think like of all the domains in life, we typically have a sense, I'm really flatlined. Like maybe it's your social life, and COVID didn't do any wonders to anybody's social life, but, or maybe it's like my fun and recreation. I feel like all I do is work and I'm not really having fun anymore. Or, maybe it is that's super fun, but the career is just absolutely deadening. Excuse me. So identifying where there does feel like there could be more life in life.
Right.
That's the first part. And so it may be more about widening, or maybe more about deepening, or maybe it's a bit about both, but it's finding, and to be really honest, the ways to widen and deepen, they're not really rocket science. So this is the beauty of it, right? Is that for most people, it's about stopping and saying, I used to love it when I would walk along the lake. I haven't done that in a while, right? Oh, well, might that be something that could be enlivening for you to do? And how often do you really need to do it? Because for most of us, the things we think would make us happy, we really don't need to do it even that often.
That's true.
Right? I don't know if you find that. Sometimes it's just a small dose, like even a small dose of a social thing, or a small dose of something that tastes lovely. Like it doesn't need to be daily.
Yeah. That is so important. And I think it's encouraging for people too, because I think they may think that, oh, I've got to totally change my life, or I've got to do like all of my bucket list things. I'm going to have to check off and get them done right away. And instead just focus on, maybe one of those. Like I was actually fortunate enough to get to check one of them off my list recently, because I didn't get to ride in a balloon yet, but I did get to attend the Albuquerque Hot Air Balloon Festival. So my son and daughter treated me that for my birthday, and it was spectacular. And I encourage everybody out there, if you can go, you've got to go at least once, because it is just amazing. And so I had this wonderful, few days and I got to spend with my son, and it's great. And so now I'm back, back to work again.
Yeah.
and doing that. And so that's, I think, is important is to be able to find those things, as you say, because you know, we need to be able to focus on that. Um, what is there anything that is there any way that somebody might want to be able to start doing this and then just somehow, I don't know, either get it wrong or just not be able to, it's just not going to turn out the way they were intending, maybe. What do you think?
Oh, what an interesting question. Well, I think you hit on something really important, where I do notice the feelings of, well, I call it the saboteur, right? Like the voices of judgment that we have about ourselves. Excuse me. I'm just going to pardon and take a quick sip of drink. So it usually comes down to the belief that we need to be living this grandiose life. And it's all or nothing thinking, right? And so it is that I really do want to do this life justice. And hey, great, high five. Or it's the carpe diem ethos that I think is taken a little over the top, where then the expectations that we just set on ourselves, which are always malleable, but sometimes we do a thing where it is that, well, I'm not living life to its fullest unless I'm doing the following things, or I talk a lot about widening and deepening. And I sometimes unwittingly lead people into this belief, and I try to debunk it fast, but here's how this goes. The quadrant, if you can imagine, if you take living wider as the y-axis and living deeper as x-axis and deeper as y, you're going to have 4 quadrants. And I recommend let's at any given moment be just even slightly plus on vitality and just slightly plus on meaning. And that's called astonishingly alive. Well, okay. Like if I'm being really honest from a marketing perspective, astonishing sounds pretty unattainable. Like it sounds pretty freaking fantastic. And I want us all to go for that. But again, relative to what fits in our lives and what suits your personality. Like I was at a workshop recently where there was a woman that said, but what if I'm just not that interested in going out and going all to sorts of concerts and doing all these things? And of course, I mean, I would never recommend that as a life well lived unless that's the life you want to live.
Right.
But it is about pacing. It is about spacing. It is about identifying what is an example of, if you looked at, for example, a month that would well lived for you. Because I think a day is actually pretty tough because every day has got different dynamics.
Yeah.
Well, what would make you feel if you were looking back on a calendar of your month just behind you? And would there be a stuff there that you would think, you know what, that was great because, I had a little sprinkling of this. I got to see my friends from college, or I got to go to the Albuquerque Hot Air Balloon Festival. That probably counts for several months worth of glee. But then, I got to do that one thing where I went in and I read to those kids after school that one time. Oh, and I tried that new pad thai restaurant and I loved it. It was so different from what I would normally do. That to me felt like a great month. Great. Then good for you. But the pressure, I believe it's self-imposed, but it's also informed by what we see on social media or what you hear about other people doing, that we compare, and we believe that I'm not living a good life unless I look a certain way or I'm traveling to certain exotic locations. And oh my goodness, let's just recalibrate that, because that's where I think that's actually the only place that I see things go a little bit awry. Because anytime someone makes one small effort to widen or deepen, it is usually met with just such a feeling of aliveness that when we can recognize that, that's an example of, well, how do I just do a little bit more of this every week? And then that's a life well lived.
Yeah. And that's so good, because that is it. It's just those baby steps. I mean, these are the things I talk about with my clients too. And I think one of the practices that I've done, I think, which would be useful in this too, is to keep a gratitude practice so that you can look back at, at your day, at the end of each night, and say, okay, this is what, I'm grateful for that happened. And that way, then you can go back in maybe a month later and say, because I know we all have these days where it's like, you just feel like, nothing went right, or, something happened with your spouse or something happened with a client, and, and, and then you start to doubt yourself. And so that if you can go back in and look at all the wonderful things that have happened, you can
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, I guess life is pretty good.
Oh, golly. I love that. So the gratitude journal is one of the most, actually, back to the nerdy science, but it's one of the most empirically based or studied
Mm,
interventions that exist, at least in the science of positive psychology. And you are so right that it changes your orientation to your life. So it's not even where I think a lot of us think it's going to perk me up when I look back and read it. It's that it changes your orientation to the days ahead. So I don't know if you have found, if you've been doing a gratitude journal for, let's just say, even 2 weeks straight,
mhm.
when you wake up on a Tuesday and go out living your life, you're now fully tuned into things that you might want to write in your journal that night. And you start looking for things, which changes your exact perception. You put on like a different pair of glasses, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's,
Mhm.
that's so right. And a lot of some of the things I've dealt with over the past years, I've also dealt with, abundance, and so a lot of abundance
Mm.
thinking, and I love it. It's like, I still, I mean, the other day went out and just, found a dime on the street and was like, yay,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
what I do is I'll put that in my gratitude journal so that when I open it up that night, I remember, oh yeah, that's right. I've got a dime more today than I did yesterday. And
Oh,
to be able to remember that, because they add up.
that is,
Even the
it's
pennies add up. I
right.
do the same thing with those. I still pick those up as well. Yeah,
That's so excellent. This whole topic of gratitude, actually, really, it's thematically, it's kind of what we're talking about big time, is like being grateful to be alive.
yeah,
Right. And so we often don't think of it in the big umbrella way, but we're talking about appreciation for life that admittedly most of us just get to take for granted until we have an event,
right,
or an event to someone very close to us. For example, I know for you, I don't know if, with your sister, for example, but
right.
we have there are wake up calls that can exist for us. And
Mhm.
a lot of research does show that people who have had a bit of a scare with losing life potentially through diagnosis or whatnot, that really snaps us to attention. And that intrigues me, because I think that ideally, we don't want to have to go through that kind of drama or hardship, or in order to really stop and savor the days that we have left, right? So how do we tap into what people who have had brushes with death experience? That to me that's the pursuit of this.
Mm, yeah, and it can be all sorts of things too. I mean, I live in Florida, and I know a couple people who've been, out of their home because of Hurricane Ian that went through, and so and yet I know that, or especially one couple in particular, I know they are, they've already had to they've gone through health challenges, with their husband has been, he was supposed to have died of cancer 4 or 5 years ago, but he's still here. So and
Wow.
then so now, even though they don't have their home now, and now they're living in a trailer, but they're still grateful to be alive and to
Yeah.
be here,
Yeah.
and that is the true trick, though, I think, is to
Mm.
be grateful, to be appreciating of every day,
Mm.
so that when things happen, I think
Mm.
that's the key, really, is that then when things, because unfortunately life will throw us curves, and
Mm.
again, it may not be us directly, but it could be a relative. And so I think when we've got that foundation of
Mm.
gratitude and appreciation for life right now, I think it helps
Yeah.
us to be able to then manage those things. Have you seen that,
Oh.
or even in the research that you've done too, or
Yeah,
seen?
yeah, that's fascinating. That it's sort of like a muscle, that if you're already working it out or warming it up,
Yeah.
that you are definitely more apt to have that optimistic mindset that can spring into action when you need to be resilient.
Yeah.
And so it absolutely is something that when you're in the groove of it and okay, I know I can handle this. I know I handle small things. I know I handle big things. Um, yeah. Yeah. I think it is true. So why not start warming up now?
Mm,
Uh, and living
exactly.
and living like that. So if, yeah, like you said, not when, but if life throws the curveballs, we're so much more prepared. And we're and there are interventions, imagining, of course, the very simple one is just we've all thought about this. Like, imagine if you were on your deathbed tonight, what would you, the way I usually use this one, is not so much for the purpose of a life review for any kind of I give myself credit for that, or I ding myself for no, it's actually about identifying maybe where we would experience feelings of regret. And as we generally know, research is clear that regret is a really tough feeling for us to grapple with things that we didn't do. And so the, acts of omission rather than commission. And so is there something that if you did find out that, I'm sorry, but your time is up, that you would think, oh, but wait, I never got to do that thing I wanted. I never got to go to that hot air balloon festival. I never got to go to Prague, or, oh, I never went and I never told my grandfather how much he meant to me, or, the list goes on.
Oh, yeah.
And so those are the opportunities where the beauty I find is that, like you were saying with Groundhog Day, is that that gentleman, Bill Murray, was able to kind of manipulate, and we do, this is where we do have that ability to shape. So I get super interested in, well, wait, what if we could pre-identify regrets in the making? And then once we have a list of them, and some are going to be silly and some of them are going to be actually quite heavy, and then we have a choice. Say, well, which one, because you can only start to do one thing at a time,
Right.
which one thing would make me feel really great and a little bit more alive if I actually took one step towards preventing this regret today, which might mean I'm going to register for that sketching class, or it might mean I'm going to book that trip to Patagonia, gosh darn it. Or I'm going to book that flight to go visit my grandfather, or what, but one step towards living a regret-free life.
And that's an interesting way to frame it too, because again, I mentioned, people talk about this bucket list of things they want to get done, but I think it's more powerful to frame it that way, as like, what are you going to, if you don't want to end up, with a life filled with regrets, because that's what they say. I mean, a lot of times is that people, it's not that they're, sorry that they, whatever. It's not necessarily about work. It's usually about time missed with family or something like that. So if we can start, make a list of 10 things right now, and for say for the next year that you want to start working towards, and saying, okay, I don't want to regret this. So what can I do, this month to be able to accomplish that? In fact, you know what? Do 12, make it one a month, and see if you can get it done. And you can always change it, don't worry that you're, because I know sometimes people will go like, oh, I've got to do this. It's okay. You're still in control. You can change your list whenever you want.
Right.
But it could be a good thing to do. And I like that. Is there anything, since you are this researcher, I think, as well as a coach, is there anything that you are specifically curious about right now?
Oh my goodness. I know curiosity is just one of my character traits. I don't know if you've ever done the viacharacter.org assessment, and I recommend that for anybody listening. It's free. It's online, so it's easy, and it is incredibly well studied and researched. So it's phenomenal. And so VIA and then character.org. And they give you 24 character strengths that are valid across cultures. And at any rate, curiosity is one of the ones that's up top for me. So it's almost like, what am I not curious about, Gloria? But in a lot of this space right now, it's funny, I have an Excel spreadsheet, which I keep for musings and thoughts and possible blog posts. And my latest list, the tab I keep, is now at over 360 different things that I want to go back to and take a look at and research. And so, oh golly, there is not a shortage of that. One of the areas I'm actually just the thing that I'm looking at now is something that's lightly researched, but it's called the James Dean effect. And it's that, would we rather live a very full life and maybe go early? Or would we rather live long and not necessarily so full of vitality or meaning, but live long into our older years? What is that preference? And so research is interesting on this. I won't maybe divulge it just yet, but more along the lines of, I say, like, would you rather have a 9 out of 10 life and, live until 70, or a 7 out of 10 life and live until 95? Or maybe those numbers we have to tweak, right? But that's interesting
But
to
still,
me.
yeah, that is interesting to think about. I think for me, I think I'd still rather live longer, because there's probably still going to be peaks and valleys anyway. And so, maybe it'll average out to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think.
Well, oh my goodness, that is one of the healthiest responses I've heard. Because you are right that a lot of it is about what you choose to focus on, and that's mindset stuff, right? And this is up your alley where, you could have a bunch of lows, which quite frankly, we know that the lows are what can make a lot of the meaning anyways. And so it's almost like, I dare you, give it to me. I know I'm going to do something with it. So I just bring it on. But yeah, if you can savor the tiny little things, like what we're talking about, a gratitude journal, it's like, I'm so delighted that I saw a bud on a tree today. It swept me off my feet.
Yes.
Like most people would like, really? But no, we know, like, finding the dime was delightful for you. And I'm looking at it because, like, we're kindred spirits here.
Yes.
We could live a life that averaged maybe a little bit lower, because we know we could ride the highs of those, even if they were small highs. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And considering also pretty much everybody else in my family has died young, I want to make it to, like, 110 or something anyway. So that's just my personal preference, because, that's been my experience.
Great.
Yeah. Is there anything else that I should have asked you about with regard to this that you think would be, or any other last words of advice for our audience?
Well, good question about the questions. I think what we've really been talking about is this concept called Memento Mori. And I like to make sure that, I don't know why I feel like I'm on a crusade for everybody to know what that means, because if we know that it's called something, and it's a Latin phrase that translates to remember that we must die. And whatever the ways are that we can stay in touch with it, and I'm going to recommend daily. And again, this is not about being morose and focusing on when we're going to end. No, we already know that. Let's use it to our advantage. Have little reminders in the olden days. And I still, to this day, I have so many skulls, it's crazy, but little things and little coins or pictures or, discussions with friends that, you can come back to, that really just get you focused on, hey, like, time's ticking. Let's do the living. It could be wide, could be deep, doesn't matter. Deep down what you need and want today, which could be different than next month. But remember, Memento Mori, and let's make it a regular practice.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did mean to ask you about that, because I did notice that was one thing and when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know what that means. I mean, yet I should have, it's Latin, and I did take Spanish at one point, so I should have figured it out, but I love it. If someone listening to you today would like to know more about, more about you, maybe either perhaps ask you to speak somewhere, or they want to maybe hire you as a coach, what's the best place for people to contact you?
Oh, well, I appreciate you asking for that. The easiest way is to reach out at 4000mondays.com, and all roads lead back to me, and would love a conversation.
All right. Excellent. Well, I will be sure and have that information in the show notes for those of you listening. And if you don't have somewhere where you can write it down, so you'll be able to go to liveloveengagePodcast.com, and you'll be able to get all that information. So this has been a wonderful conversation that we had today. Yes, I love what you are doing, and I love this whole premise of helping people to remember. Yeah, remember I believe our soul is eternal, and our body, though, is finite. On this earth right now, we only have a certain amount of time. We only have 4,000 Mondays, give or take, depending on where you are and how old you are at the moment. I'm going to have to do that calculation, because I was like, oh, wow. Oh, yeah, because I just turned 60. So that number's getting down. But, but maybe I'm still not quite halfway there. So they're a
Mhm.
little, maybe just a little over halfway, I would say.
Going the
So,
distance.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Love
still
it.
have some. So thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I'm sure everyone else received value from it today as well.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been so much fun chatting with you.
And I also want to thank all of you for watching and for listening. And I truly appreciate it and encourage you to, if you make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, if you're not already, and if you see value, to share this with a friend and also leave a comment. I would love to hear your comments. You can not only send it not or leave a comment on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, but you can also reach out to my website through my website. Go to gloriarand.com. So until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.